Hi there, I'm Christine Dunbar from speechmodification.com, and this is my Smart American Accent Training. Welcome to our live question and answer class. Today is Saturday. We meet each week at this time, and please feel free to ask your questions at any time. You can write them in the chat and I'll answer them for you live. So at the beginning today, I want to talk a little bit about linking consonants. I had a question from a viewer about how to say the word that after the word was or after the word isn't. And we'll also look at phrases like did they and in there to help this be smoother and easier for you when you're talking in everyday speech. So the TH sounds, of course, can be challenging if you don't have these sounds in your native language. But oftentimes people will master the sound. It's just that when they go to put them into everyday speech to link them and try to use them smoothly, they may stumble. So let's look at what's happening here. When we have the TH sound in a phrase, we do need to use that tongue position of the tongue resting between the teeth. So I'm always going to say they or that or this or think with the same tongue position. But I may do some little cheats of the sounds before or after the TH or how I actually do that TH sound depending on the flow. Oftentimes the error that happens initially, of course, is that you don't get that tongue position. But then later, I do see people struggling to have the tongue between the teeth. They may be trying to go too far out, like they, rather than just they. So as long as my tongue is touching the upper and lower teeth and there's some room for the air to flow, for that sound to continue, that, they, I will get the correct sound. And so let's talk about specifically these phrases to help you with that flow. So for example, when I'm doing a phrase like was that, I have the Z sound followed by the TH sound. So when I'm saying was, my tongue is back behind my teeth, the air is flowing and continuous. And then to move, I need to move from that Z position to the TH position. Was that, was that. You will hear that sometimes it makes the air sound a little bit stopped because it's was that. If it can keep the flow going, that's going to help you. And also know that the TH is more important than the Z. So when you're practicing, always start with the TH word and then add the additional sound. So that would sound like that was that or z that. I can just do the Z sound and the TH sound together so I can feel that movement, feel how that sounds, z that. And then practice lots of combinations like was that, is there, was there, because these everyday words are the ones that we say the most. So the more you've practiced those correctly, smoothly with that transition, the easier it will be when it comes time to say them and speak them. Looking at the next combination I want to look at is the N to TH combination, in there, in the, on the, etc. Another very common combination. Some of the most frequent word 2 and 3 word phrases have in and on with them, there, those, etc. So everyone needs to be able to do this easily. Looking at how we do that, what I do there is instead of the position I typically would use for the N, like in there, with my tongue lifting behind my teeth and then my tongue going to the TH position, again, the TH sound has to win. It's the most important. I can't get to that sound smoothly if I am lifting to in with my tongue behind my teeth, in there. I can only really do that with a break. So what I do instead is I still form the N with my tongue behind my teeth, but instead of the tip of my tongue lifting there, I lift a little further back with the tongue. It looks like this, in there. So you can still hear, I can make the N without the ideal tongue position of tongue behind the teeth. I just have my tongue ready for the TH. So I even put my tongue into the TH position, then I push it against my teeth and upper palate so that I can get the N sound. In there. A way to try this is just, again, to say the TH word first, say there, and then get your tongue ready for there, in there, in there. It might feel unnatural at first, but what you'll find is that it's much smoother and easier to do in there, on there, with that co-articulation is what it's called, with that different tongue position. So again, you can use in, on, there, them, those, etc. Using lots of those two-word combinations with common phrases can be helpful. Then when it comes to linking T's and D's to the TH, what happens here is more that we change how we say the T sound and the D sound. For T's and D's, if I'm saying a word by itself or followed by a consonant, did I have that D releasing. I do say a true D or isn't it. That one's a little different because of the NT. At any rate, when we link to a TH sound from a consonant sound, from a T or a D, or any other stopped consonant sound, we don't release that first consonant. So rather than saying did they with a break between and a true D, I say did they. And so again, I may be forming my D slightly differently. I might even be doing the same thing I did with the N. Did they? I'm stopping the air and not letting that D out, and I'm just releasing the air again when I get to the TH sound. Did they, did those, need that, etc. You can play around with different tongue positions. One thing I would caution you against is that sometimes people will stop the air in their throat. Did they? And you can hear how it doesn't really sound like I'm making the D sound there. So the difference is, did they? I'm stopping the air somewhere in my mouth with my tongue, or I'm putting my tongue into that D position, but it's ready for the TH sound, versus stopping the air here at my throat, did, or my tongue isn't touching anywhere, did they? You don't want that combination. Rather, did they, to be able to do that smoothly. We do the same thing with isn't that, but isn't tends to use a stop T and a very short N. So I'm going to probably have my tongue in the position for in there. Isn't that, where I'm already getting the tongue ready for the TH. Isn't that? Because we don't need the T sound for isn't. We use a stopped T and a short N to mark that. This is a lot of detail about a lot of different patterns that I've talked about in many other videos. It might feel a little advanced for you. Not to worry. You can always also practice isn't that, did they. That's going to be well understood and it's going to be correct. This is just looking at, if you can do all those sounds, how you'll hear native speakers actually doing it. Because I think one of the issues with pronunciation is that we learn individual words, we learn individual sounds, and then when we listen to native speakers, they're not saying was that or isn't that. They're saying was that, isn't that, and they're making these changes and these subtle differences in their speech. So it's hard to hear those sounds, it's hard to know what's happening. This type of advanced linking and reduced sounds is covered in my Real Talk series, both here on YouTube and in our Real Talk course on speechmodification.com. That course is available for under $2, and it's great for advanced speakers because it teaches you a lot of these patterns, as well as how to use TV shows and movies to improve your accent to have that linking, that natural fluent speech of a native speaker. So check that out on speechmodification.com. If you're more still at a more basic level of accent and pronunciation, check out our Sounds of English course for the fundamentals of all of the sounds of English, or our 6-week course for help with integrating your pronunciation and intonation for American accent for fluent speech. Okay, let's turn to your questions. Please feel free to type them at any time in the chat. Even if you're watching this as a replay, if you didn't make it to the live class, you can put your questions in a comment later, and I'll follow up with you to share videos and resources I have. I have a lot of free materials on speechmodification.com in our free practice area. So many times your questions can be answered by content I've already created, and I'm happy to share that with you. But of course, the live class is a great opportunity to find out right away answers to your questions. I do go through all of the comments and questions, and I have a long list of things I'm planning to cover in future classes, both in our daily Word of the Day classes as well as in our Saturday live question and answer classes. We also have an option to join as a channel member, and channel members can ask their questions at any time throughout the week, and I answer that for them each week on Sundays in a live class that they can also watch as a replay. So if you don't want to have to wait for the answers to your questions, joining as a channel member is a great way to get those perks as well as to show your support. Okay, nice to see you. We have one of our channel members here today as well. We have a question about the word caffeine, very important word in the morning. So caffeine has second syllable stress. So the "feen" syllable has a clear vowel and it's longer. EI and IE, always hard to know how to pronounce them. In caffeine, it's the E sound, which we write as lowercase I in the IPA, or we often spell it with EE or EA, so I'll rewrite it here this way for you. Feen is going to be long, have that clear vowel. And then the ca, it also has a clear vowel, that ah, like in black cat, but it's going to be shorter. So you'll hear caffeine. As you've seen in our Word of the Day classes, I always recommend not only learning and practicing the pronunciation of the word by itself, but use it in some short phrases so that you can feel natural with that rhythm and those vowel sounds with the correct pronunciation. So I'd have caffeine in my coffee. I try not to be too addicted to caffeine. Some example sentences for you. Great. Eddie, thank you. I'm glad you liked the linking related lesson. That's one of the questions that we've talked about in some of our member classes, and I'm glad that was useful for you. If you're here live, do feel free to ask your questions at any time. I will maybe add a few other pieces for linking, because we did have a question about another linking question. Let me see if I can find it that came in recently. All right, so I don't see that question, but I will talk about some recent words that were requested. So we had a request for the word later. This is something that is probably has to do with the TER. A lot of words that end with TER or have a T in the middle and end with ER have a flap for the T sound. So for the letters D and T, often when they're in the middle of the words, they're what's called a flap sound. I usually write it as a D because when we naturally will say words like, for example, ladder, we naturally say that flap, ladder. A flap is somewhat between a T and a D where the voice is on, the tongue goes up, but I don't stop the air. So rather than ladder, just like we were talking about with those unreleased stops, my tongue just goes up, does a light touch to that spot behind the teeth, and then releases. In some languages, the flap is an R. For example, in Spanish, pero, the R sound can be said with a flap. It's like one roll of a rolled R. So at any rate, think about, we have first syllable stress, and letter A in later says the A diphthong. So make sure you hold your A a long time. One strategy to get that diphthong correct is to say the word lay by itself. A, you're going to close and relax as you're moving from that A to the I sound of the diphthong. And then there's our flap, and then we end in the later. If you have trouble with the you can start with the der, later. Okay, great. Thank you for that question. And another recent request was for the word faculty. So looking at faculty, this is a case where we do say the T, faculty. I think in some cases faculty. Yeah, this one is optional. So you can say a true T, faculty, or you can use a flap here, faculty, just like in later. This letter A says the A, black cat vowel. We also, again, have first syllable stress, so faculty. faculty. I think when I'm saying it by itself, or if I'm saying it slow, faculty, I'm more likely to say that T. If I were using it though fluently, I might use the flap. A faculty lunch, he's on the faculty at that institution. So it's not one that's really clear cut which one to use, flap T or non-flap T. You can go with either. This U, letter U, we don't really do much vowel here. You can see in the IPA there's not even any symbol there. If there's going to be anything, it's going to be a little of a schwa sound. It'll sound like T or D, faculty. But you can say it fackle, just like we do Seattle or little, where I'm moving right from that L to that flap, faculty, or that K to that L, fackle. It's a syllabic L, so there's a little bit of a schwa sound before it. You can get help for syllabic L in my video for that, as well as do check out our Sounds of English course for help breaking down these things like the flap and the syllabic L sounds. It'll show you what word it's in, what words they're in, how they're spelled, and what accent error patterns you may have on them. Thanks for that request. Eddie has a question about how to study collocations. I would say just looking at the common ones, particularly starting with things like flap T, the ones that change as you link together. And then also just looking at building up from common everyday phrases. Because oftentimes as we're learning vocabulary and grammar, we are looking at expanding how we're speaking, but 80% of our speech is those little words like was and in and there. So those ideas like isn't that, was there, the more you can practice with those kinds of combinations, the smoother and more fluent your speech will be. Okay, we have a question about ameliorate and outmaneuver. So for ameliorate, second syllable stress here. So letter A is going to sound like it's going to be vowel schwa. Then our stress is on the me syllable, ameliorate. Letter E is going to say the E sound that we usually spell with E or two E's, ameli. Again, here's our I also doing an E sound, not stressed, but still the same sound as in the me, ameliorate, but it's going to go by much quicker. So stretching on meal, on me, and then shorter on meliorate. And then we'll do a stopped T there at the end. Amelior, sorry. We use an here, not an or, because it's unstressed. So letters OR can say the sound or the or sound. In this case, they say an unstressed You could even write it as an and then put your R on your rate syllable. We do have a clear diphthong on rate. It's not stressed, but you still need that long diphthong A. This one, I would suggest breaking it down, practicing syllable by syllable, going slowly and then speeding back up. That would sound like ameliorate, ameliorate, ameliorate. That's definitely something that I would have to do, especially in a syllable like this that has a word like this that has three unstressed syllables. Another strategy that you might find helpful is just to do those unstressed syllables and then add the rest. So trying meliorate, or just liorate, ameliorate. Because this part has to go by very quickly, and that makes it challenging because it has the L's and the R's and those clear and reduced vowels all in together. Great word. Thank you for that request. Okay, and your other word was outmaneuver. So the main stress in this is going to be on the stressed syllable of maneuver. I'm going to try to remember how to spell it. EU, maneuver. So the stress is on the new syllable. Thinking of that like the word new. And in American English, we say that with an oo, no glide, no new, but new, neuver. There's going to be a little secondary stress on the out syllable. You might think about that like ow and a T, out, maneuver. So this letter A is going to be a vowel schwa. Looks like probably secondary stress on out, main stress on, not on on out, main stress on new, and then ver. So you can, again, try it syllable by syllable. Outmaneuver, maneuver, outmaneuver. I do like starting just on the stress syllable for practice too. That would sound like neuver, maneuver, outmaneuver. Both of your words, I would say, would also be important to practice in some short phrases, because they're the kind of thing where you practice it, you can get that word, you can manage it, and then when you have to actually use it in speech, you may still stumble or struggle because they're longer, a lot of syllables. So the more you can practice them in some short phrases, the smoother and more confidently you can say them in real speech. Okay, we had a question about are there two ways to pronounce the beginning of the word quarter? With very clear W glide, quarter, and the other way maybe lazier, smoother, quarter. Yes, that's a good point. So I would say the correct way is with the qua for quarter, but you may hear people saying it more like quarter rather than quarter, quarter. That sounds a little accented to me, like regional U.S. accents. So I would try to go for quarter. You can kind of think about that by starting with quar. But I do think you're right that people will say quarter. I have a quarter dollar, quarter. Yeah, okay. So people do say it kind of more like the same as the word quarter. It's not correct, but at the same time it may become correct, because of course when enough people use a certain pronunciation, language shifts and changes, and there's more than one correct pronunciation. This is the one you're going to see in the dictionary, and I would still probably try to go for that. But if it's a lot easier for you to say quarter, this quarter. Yeah, actually I think I use both. That's a very good point. I hadn't really thought about that in detail, but I do think because qua is a little bit hard to say. If I'm just talking in regular speech, it's quarter after. I would definitely say quarter instead of quarter. It's not. I wouldn't say quarter. Good point. Thank you. So yes, question about whether the glides can totally disappear. I think they do totally disappear oftentimes, and maybe they're subtle, like quarter. But I can really feel a different shape in the mouth when I'm just saying that word fluently and naturally. Great, I'm going to make a note of that and put some notes in my video about quarter, because I think I probably talked about quar, although I don't know, maybe I discovered that same thing as I was talking. But anyway, thank you for bringing that up. That's a great question. Okay. Question about biodegradable materials or containers. So biodegradable is going to be stressed on the grade syllable. So biodegradable, is that the spelling? Sounds like grade, bull, syllabic L at the end. And then biodegradable. So start with your grade syllable, gradable, biodegradable. Materials, stressed on the T syllable, materials. And containers, stressed on the tain syllable, true T on containers. Great. Question about how many syllables to pronounce in the word sovereignty. I would say 3 syllables. We do have sovereign or sovereign. I think you can probably do either for sovereign, but Americans will typically reduce there, so they would do sovereign, sovereignty, because it's not stressed in there, so those unstressed syllables tend to get reduced. If you did sovereignty, you'd be understood, but I'm pretty sure most native speakers will just say sovereignty. Let's look that one up in the dictionary, because the dictionary can help us also see the sounds and syllables, and sometimes when there's more than one correct way, sometimes the dictionary is only going to show you the one with more syllables, and Americans will actually reduce it, and sometimes they'll show you both ways. So the dictionary that I like, I'll show you how to get there. On my website, speechmodification.com, I mentioned earlier, I do have those online courses, and you can learn about using dictionaries in those, as well as check out our free practice area. If you go to the online practice free trial, we have a search box here where you can type in words or phrases or what you're looking for, and all of the lessons related to that will come up. So I'm going to type in dictionary and hit my search key, and it'll show you all of the different lessons I have related to the dictionary. This first one that just says using online dictionaries has a link to the dictionary that I like. It teaches you about reading in the dictionary. So I often recommend this Oxford Learner's Dictionary because it breaks down the words in a good way, it uses the IPA, and it also shows you both British and American English. So if we look up sovereignty, what you'll find is that you may have learned the British way and it's different than the American way. It's just good to know about both. But yes, both of these just show it as sovereignty. So you can see, even though it's looks like sovereignty, it just has sovereignty. No sound between the V and the R sound. So that can be one way, even though sometimes it's hard to think about rhythm and syllables by looking at the dictionary. Sometimes the sounds that are there will show you. Okay, we have a question about the word vulnerable. This is one that has more than one option, again, for using reductions. After class, I'll put a link to my video for vulnerable so you can get more details on it, because it's one that people often ask about. So it looks like vulnerable, and you can say it that way. That sounds like vulnerable. First syllable stress on vul. But people will often reduce it to vulnerable, where instead of neurable, they'll do kind of more like vulnerable, reduce it down to 3 syllables, vulnerable, so the neura becomes almost like there's no vowel in there, vulnerable. It has that syllabic L that we talked about earlier, vowel schwa. I think it's totally fine to say vulnerable. Just try to be long on the vul and then do your neurable quickly. Again, to practice that, trying neurable or neurable, vulnerable. Okay, that's, I think, again, anything that has the multiple R's and L's is challenging, that syllabic L is challenging, and when the first syllable is stressed and we have a lot of unstressed syllables we have to move quickly through at the end, that's what makes it, a word like vulnerable, challenging. So thank you for asking about that. It's definitely hard for a lot of people, including native speakers, I would say. Okay, question about the word unsettling. Unsettling. Yes. So question, was there an extra sound before unsettling? So settling, yeah, there, you can say unsettling, settling, but that sounds more British. So in settling, it's like the word settle, where we have the flap, settle. So not a lot of sound between the D and the L, but a little bit of a syllable there. So unsettling, settling. Yeah. So it looks like unsettling, like we would go right from the T to the ling, but we do put a syllable in there, unsettling. So practice settle and then add ing. Settle, settling, settling. Interesting how we reduce and leave some syllables out, and others we kind of almost insert an extra one in there. That's more about the way it's spelled, like little. If we had a word like littling, we wouldn't do littling, we'd do little, littling. So that L gets a syllable, basically. Good question. Thank you, Eddie. Okay, last one for today, and then we need to wrap up. We have a question about the word alien. So, Julian, you've written with some symbols that I don't know what they mean by those symbols necessarily, except I think what you're trying to show, they're trying to show is where the stress is. So the one way is showing it more like alien, like stressing the ale and then adding yen, alien, versus alien, alien, or alien. So I think the symbols are trying to show alien versus alien, alien. And I would say it probably like alien, alien, where I would put the Y in here, alien, alien, alien. I say it like alien, alien. Yeah, okay, so thank you for that question. When you're unsure about symbols, if you're seeing them from the dictionary, most dictionaries, printed or online dictionaries, have a pronunciation guide, and you may need to search for where it is, but they'll show you what symbols they're using for which sounds and give you example words. I use IPA symbols and mostly line up with how they show it in the Oxford Learner's Dictionary, although I use some slightly different ways of transcribing those sounds. In my videos, I'm always going to show you the IPA as well as an alternative spelling to help you think of what the sounds are. So whichever way can help you really ground into understanding the sounds that the letters are saying, that's a good way to go. And whatever dictionary you want to use is fine as long as you understand what the symbols in the dictionary mean. So finding the pronunciation guide for that particular dictionary can be very helpful. Thanks so much, everyone, for being here and being a part of class today. Wonderful questions, and I look forward to seeing you in next week's class. I hope you can make it. You can also leave comments and questions on any of our videos throughout the week, and I will add them to cover in a future Word of the Day class. Right now, I'm working on requests from almost 6 months ago, so it may be a while before you see your word covered, but I will be getting to it eventually. You can also attend this live class. It's a great way to get a quicker question answered, or you can join as a channel member, ask your questions at any time throughout the week, and I'll cover them for you each Sunday in our members-only class. Looking forward to seeing you there as well. Thanks so much for subscribing, liking, sharing, and commenting. It really helps support me here at speechmodification.com. I'm Christine Dunbar from speechmodification.com. Remember, if you want to sound like a native speaker, you can do it. speechmodification.com. Bye, everyone. Thanks for a great class.